Hi, everyone. Thank you to DynamicsCon for hosting my session, and thank you to you for voting. Today's session is going to be how to integrate the common data service with F&O and CE. My name is Chad Weiner, and I'm from Alithia. Let's go ahead and get started. Quickly about me. I'm based in Denver, Colorado. I am a CRM solution architect, been working on the platform since the 4.0 days. I specialize in field service, manufacturing, and distribution, and I invite you to connect with me on my social channels there. Today, the agenda is going to be a platform overview of the different ways we can integrate data with CDS and F&O. We're going to talk about Power Automate first, then the data integrator, and then DualRight, and we'll wrap up with any questions and wrap-up items. There are several different ways in which you can integrate data with CDS and F&O. And I'm going to use a couple of acronyms throughout this presentation. The first is going to be CDS, or maybe you've heard DataFlex Pro. It's essentially the common data service. This is CRM Online. It's essentially a database online that makes it very easy to access, get data in and out of, and you can extend it with Power Apps, Power Automate. There's also CE. This stands for Customer Engagement. This is Microsoft's CRM platform. And then, of course, you have F&O. This is the finance and operations or supply chain business applications from Microsoft for their ERP. The top three ways, again, lots of different ways you can integrate data with F&O. The top three we're going to mention today are Microsoft's newest, called DualRight. We'll also talk about the classic data integrator, which DualRight is a derivative of. And then OData is how these the data entities inside of F&O make their way into CDS. And there'll be links provided here at the end of the documentation. So really, we're going to focus in on DualRight and the classic integration approaches. And so there are different ways, Microsoft tools, in which you can integrate data. The first is Power Automate. The second is the CDS data integrator, which is more batch. And then DualRight, which is near real time. If you're looking to use third-party tools, you can use SSIS-based tools like KingswaySoft or CozyRock. Or there are some integration platform as a service tools like Scribe, which do work really well with connecting Dynamics 365 business applications. If you're not familiar with the common data model, this is the data model, the database schema that's inside of common data services by default. If you're familiar with CRM, accounts, contacts, activities, these things will look familiar to you. Of course, we've got different modules, sales, service. There's even some out-of-the-box finance and supply chain entities inside of CDS that allow for the data integration to almost happen seamlessly. And so really, we're going to talk about getting F&O data into the CDS via this common data model that'll allow this data to be exposed to CRM. It could be exposed to a Power App portal, or maybe we can use Power Automate or Power Apps to leverage the data in some way. When you talk about the Power Platform, it's a low-code platform that apps can use. It spans Office 365, Azure, and Dynamics 365. Power BI is going to be for reporting and analytics, those dashboards and visuals. Power Apps is going to be the low-code, no-code environment where we can make mobile apps and business applications. Power Automate's our workflow engine where we can automate many of our daily tasks. And then if we're trying to get AI and virtual agents and bots into the mix, that's where Power Virtual Agents come into play. So all of this data that sits in CDS, whether it's F&O data or CRM data, it can be exposed to these different tools on the Power Platform. Before we get into a couple of demos, hopefully you understand all the different areas that make up both CE and the F&O module. When we talk about CE, that's customer engagement, there's sales for leads and opportunity management, activity tracking. We have marketing to send them marketing emails, track them on our website, include them in automated campaigns. We have customer service, so if our customers have issues, they can raise cases with us on the portal or via call-in or web chat. If we have to dispatch a truck, that's field service. We can manage our on-site technicians. And then PSA, project service automation. If we deal with Microsoft Project, we have resources and billing and revenue recognition. Much of that can be handled here. So all of that makes up the customer engagement module. And then, of course, you have Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, Supply Chain Management. This integrates really well with the Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement Platform that's built on CDS. So we're going to explore some of that further on in today's session. When we talk about different types of Power Apps, there are apps for your internal staff. So these can be Canvas apps or model-driven apps. And then there are Power App portals. So this is where if we want to expose this data to external stakeholders, we have the ability to do that. So the first integration approach that we're going to talk about, from moving data between finance and operations and Dynamics 365 customer engagement or sales or customer service, is Power Automate. For me, this was the one that I got into easiest. It's the least technical barrier, and you can do some pretty powerful data integration scenarios with Power Automate. Microsoft provides an out-of-the-box connector for both Dynamics 365 customer engagement as well as finance and operations. And it provides access to those data entities, which we'll talk about. And those templates help you get started. So there's a lot of templates like syncing accounts or syncing work items that will provide you with the mappings, and you can customize those out of the box, or you can start from scratch and build your own. This is an example of some of the actions that are found in the Power Automate F&O action instance. So you can create a record in F&O. You can delete a record in F&O. You can execute a business event or an action inside of F&O. There's a whole slew of business events that can be triggered off of, that can trigger automation in other systems or in various parts of the business through Power Automate. You can get a record. So if you know a serial number or an account number and you want to retrieve a specific record by, give me this account by the account number, you can get a specific record and do some action on it. And then you can get list of records and process those lists, applying an action to each one. So lots of really rich actions that are available with just a point and click from a business user who may know where the data needs to be and how it needs to be transformed. So let's take a quick look at an example of using Power Automate to integrate some data between Dynamics 365 customer service and finance and operations. So in this scenario, we're going to be looking at a case in customer engagement that's going to turn into an RMA, a return order, that's going to have to be returned and processed through F&O. So here you're looking at Dynamics 365 customer service. We're on a case. It's a case type RMA. And here we're seeing that we've got a serial number and a Lithia's warranty solution managing some warranty details. Let's look at the RMA about this, the RMA details about this case. We can see there's one product listed. We're returning some grapefruit juice. It was bad. We can fill in our disposition codes and our return reasons for why this product may have been damaged. And then you'll notice to the right, we've got a Power App, which is just a button that is going to launch a Power Automate flow. And so I've built a Power Automate flow that essentially will move the data back and forth. And so if you haven't embedded a Power App in CRM, you simply go into a field, you double click on the properties, you click controls, and you can go through customizing a Canvas app. And again, this is a simple Canvas app. It's just a button with a label, and clicking on that button launches an action. And one of those actions is Power Automate. So this button will kick off a Power Automate flow, and this is what that flow looks like. So when the button's clicked, we get the case data, right? So all the details from the case, we get all the details from the account associated to the case. I check to make sure that the case is open and that it's only of an RMA type. We only want to move RMAs back and forth. And then this is where the power of the platform comes in. Now I can create a header record. So that return order header, I can create the header in the right company with the right information against the right customer. Notice I'm passing in the account number, so we're looking up and associating this return order to that customer inside of customer service. I'm going to then pass back the RMA number from F&O to CE for the agent on the phone. So when the customer calls in with their issue, they can get the RMA number back quickly from the agent. Now we're going to go through and list all of the products on that RMA and CRM and add them to F&O as return order lines. So let's give this a quick test. We'll click our button. We can see that our flow is executing. It's completed some of the steps. And if we refresh the screen inside of Dynamics 365 Customer Service and go back to that RMA section, we can see that the RMA numbers filled in below. So that came from F&O, from the Power Automate, and if we go back into F&O and we refresh our grid, we'll see that our new return order 151 has been created for Birch Company. And if we drill into this return order header, we'll see all that information that was populated from Flow, as well as all of the lines. So there's that header, and if we go in, we'll see the lines. It looks like that flow is just finishing up. And if we go back and refresh that, we can see that it just succeeded. All the checkboxes are there. It went through all of our steps, and if we refresh this screen real quick, we'll see that line has been processed. So really powerful scenarios that you can unlock if you're just familiar with Power Automate. The next concept, so that we've talked first about Power Automate. This is probably the easiest approach to integrating data really across any system where there's a connector. With finance and operations, Microsoft has provided the connector for you to easily get data in and out of CDS and F&O. One concept to understand as we continue talking about the data integrator and DualRight is the concept of a data entity. For those that are familiar with administering or customizing Dynamics 365 CRM or customer engagement, we're familiar with entities. These are the tables where we can easily add fields and views. We can import them, export them. For those that use F&O, there's a similar concept called data entities, which are the OData endpoints that are specifically exposed for us to move data back and forth. And so it's very important to understand that the data entities are normalized, and that means they're simplified. So up here in the top, we've got an example of the customer tables inside of F&O. Very complex. The address isn't with the customer. All this data is on different tables, and the system pulls it together. When you go and integrate data with CRM, we just have a single account table. We just have a single contact table, a single entity. And so there are these data entities in F&O, for example, the customer data entity, that combines or normalizes all of these tables into one table called customer so that we can sync that data back and forth. Out of the box, F&O comes with many data entities already there. You can create custom data entities for any custom tables that you've already created. So the second tool in the Power Platform CDS tool belt for integrating data is the data integrator for CDS. This has been out for several years, and it's essentially a point-to-point integration service that integrates data into or out of the common data service. And so some of the first built connectors were for, of course, finance and operations. And so there's a documentation around the method in which you set up prospect to cache and the data integrator, which we'll go over. And then there is some scenarios that you can light up. So once you enable the data flow, the prospect to cache inside of your environments, the first thing you can start doing is pushing accounts from sales to F&O customers. Contacts can go both ways. F&O is the product catalog master. So all of your products, your pricing, your units of measures, those will come in from finance and operations. And then, of course, the prospect to cash scenario allows sales individuals to be inside of CRM, whether it's on a tablet or on the browser, start quoting with those products. They can activate a quote and move it over to F&O for processing, or maybe they convert the quote to an order, and once the customer conforms, that order goes over to F&O as a sales order, and then the invoice gets passed back to CRM sales as read-only. So there are provided maps that will allow you to really light up this functionality out of the box. So this is the prospect to cash data flow. Microsoft also has additional data flows, one for field service. So work orders and agreements can flow back and forth with finance and operations. And then they also have a data flow for the PSA project service automation, where project contracts and contract lines and milestones can move back and forth. So lots of different scenarios here for integration, integrating the Dynamics 365 business applications. So let's take a look at how you set up the data integrator with Dynamics 365 sales and finance and operations. So the first thing you do is there's a set of solutions that have to be installed inside of your CRM environment. So from Microsoft AppSource, you'll want to do a search for the prospect to cash solutions. You'll go ahead and get now, and this will install a couple of solutions into your environment that facilitate the data integration. Secondly, you move to make.powerapps.com and you create two connections, one for Dynamics 365 sales and another for Dynamics 365 finance and operations. You'll click new connection, you'll search for Dynamics 365, and you'll set up one for Dynamics 365 FinOps and one for sales. Don't use the common data service connector, use the Dynamics 365 sales connector. Once those connections are set up, you then move into admin.powerapps.com. You'll see this data integration area, and this is where you can begin setting up kind of the integration. The projects are your mappings, so we'll come back to that in a second. You'll first set up a connection set, mapping those two connections you just created previously. This may take up to 30 minutes for them to show up here, but you'll essentially give it a test name, and then you can pick those connections that'll be listed here. One for your customer engagement, sales, and another for your finance and operations. I've got a lot of environments here. Yours won't be as long. We've picked our F&O on top. We've picked our CRM at the bottom. Then you have to map essentially an F&O company to a Dynamics 365 sales business unit. So here we go back into CRMs in settings security, and we can see our business units. Here we have one business unit FS demos. So we're going to map this business unit to a company inside of finance and operations. So USP2 will map to the FS demo security business unit. So you're starting to see some of the company striping begin to form in the data integrator service, where you don't really get that in Power Automate. Once you have your connection sets created, you'll go into projects, click new project, and you'll follow the documentation creating the proper templates for whatever scenarios you want to light up. If you're doing prospect to cash, you'll do accounts, contacts, and products and quotes. Here we'll give the template a name. I'll call it the account sync. We'll find the account sales to FinOps, pick that template. We can see that there's a bunch of templates that we could pick from. We'll pick the connection set that we just created in the step previously, confirm the details, confirm the organizations, the company and the business unit, and we'll click confirm, and this is going to set up the project. This is essentially creating the map, right? So we have the account project. Within there, there's a map. And if we drill in, we can see those are the connections. There's scheduling. So we can run this every 5 minutes, once a day. And we can see up to 30 days of execution history. Let's drill into the mapping. And this is where the individual fields from CRM to F&O are going to be mapped. If we want to customize the map or add a new mapping, we just click the plus sign. Let's create a new project real quick, and let's show how to integrate quotes. So we've set up accounts, we've set up products. Now we want to go and sync quotes. So we'll set up a project, call it quote sync. We'll pick the template. Sometimes the list is long. You got to Control F and do a search. There's that quote sales to finance and operations. We'll click that. Now you'll notice that after I pick my connection set and my organizations, this mapping's going to have two maps underneath it. They're called tasks, one for the header and one for the lines. We can see our header and line mappings. If we drill into them, let's go ahead and make an update. So we'll go into the header. And let's say, notice there's two blank nones at the bottom. Those allow me to map. So let's map description from CRM to customer reference in F&O. And let's map the delivery requested by, so when the customer wants it delivered by, to the requested shipping date. We've mapped two additional fields. We'll click Save. And once we're ready, we can go ahead and run this project. So let's click Run Project. Now, what's nice about the data integrator is you can keep track of these projects as they're running. So we can see for this one, it errored out. There were 10 errors, and we can drill into this record to see what went on. So we can see that there was a category or an item that wasn't specified. So you can drill in, you can see the information. Let's go back into sales. And let's go through fixing this issue. So we've added a product correctly. One thing to know is that only externally maintained products can be quoted, right? So only products that come from F&O can be included in quotes that'll be integrated. So I've added in a custom description. We filled in the delivery date. Those are those two custom fields we mapped. Then we activate the quote. And the next time that map runs, it'll pick up that quote. So we can see that there was one upsert. And so that means it took the quote, lines, and header from sales, pushed it into finance and operations. There's that test that we just did. There's the header, and there's the line. We also can see, if we go back to the header details, there's our customer reference, right? There's one of our custom fields that we mapped in, and there's the requested ship date. So very easy to expand and extend the custom maps, or the out-of-the-box maps that Microsoft provides. You can also create your own maps if you need to as well. So we've talked about 2 out of the 3 concepts today. The first was Power Automate and Flow. The second was the data integrator service. I just showed you how to set it up, play with some of the maps. And again, a bunch of this documentation can be found on the Microsoft documentation websites. The third and newest, it went GA this year, is DualRight. And so DualRight is the out-of-the-box infrastructure that Microsoft provides that is essentially near real-time interaction and integration between model-driven apps like sales, customer service, field service, project service automation, and finance and operations. Essentially, any data change in F&O will push that change over to the corresponding record in real time in CE and vice versa. And so Microsoft's done a really good job of harmonizing some of the data concept inside of both of the systems so that data can map and integrate easier. So there's been company entities, there's a customer entity. Recently, there's been enhancements for the party entity so that multiple contacts can be related to accounts. Lots of different functionality. Much of this is documented, and Microsoft's constantly releasing new features and functionality to DualRight with every release of the product. Let's look at a quick overview illustration of how DualRight works. So on the left, we have CDS, and on the right, we have F&O. Essentially, there are entities and mappings that get configured. And what happens is whenever, say, Sally is a sales rep, she's going to do some action inside of CDS to trigger, say, creation of a new account. So she's going to do her actions as normal inside of CDS. And business logic gets applied in the sales area. But it's not the same business logic that gets provided in F&O. Like when she enters in an address in CDS, it doesn't do the F&O address validation. So we enter in a new account in CDS, all the CRM logic fires and checks. Then there are plugins that move this data over from CDS to F&O. So then the plugins fire, that data attempts to be written DualRight, written to the other system, in this case F&O. Those mappings are taken into consideration of where the CRM field should go. That data has been passed over to F&O. That same transaction is attempting to be committed on F&O, where its business logic is being applied. Is the account set up correctly? Is the address set up okay? Does it have a credit check? And if there are any issues, those errors are passed back to the user in CRM, or the record is committed and the user can go on in their way. So the transactions are essentially mirrored in the other system. And so when you click save in CDS, it takes a second to save the corresponding record inside of finance and operations. So how can you set up DualRight? Make sure you have all the prerequisites filled out. Your CRM needs to be on a certain version. Your F&O needs to be on one of the latest versions. Once you have all that, then you essentially go through the process of linking the two environments, which is doing some admin setups, clicking next through some screens. And then you begin to enable all of the entity maps that Microsoft provides out of the box. Or, of course, you can create your own maps through DualRight as well. One thing that's important to note is that you can't have the data integrator, that prospect to cache setup that I showed you the second time around, in the same environment as is DualRight. So that's pretty well laid out in the documentation, but right now the data integrator doesn't really play well with DualRight when they're in the same environment. So let's first take a look at how we can set up DualRight. So we're in Dynamics 365. First thing, DualRight documentation, just Google or Bing DualRight docs, and this should take you there. You'll need to install 2 DualRight solutions from AppSource. So again, you won't be able to install these 2 solutions if the prospect to cache solution is also installed in your environment. Once those are installed, you'll go into F&O into the data management area, and there'll be this new DualRight tile. And essentially, this will allow you to go through the process. So I'm looking at an environment that's already been linked. We see some of the maps are running, some of them aren't. Let's go ahead and add an entity map. We could do that by clicking the plus sign. We can sort by status. So here are all the running maps that are moving data back and forth: contacts, asset, products. Here are some that aren't running that we can enable: positions, employment, warehouses. Different scenarios can be lit up within DualRight. Let's go ahead and unlink this environment. So we'll unlink this environment, and then I'll show you how to relink it. So you've got a blank F&O, you've got CRM. You go to data management. You'll click on DualRight. Again, we've installed the DualRight solutions in our CDS environment. We've done most of the prerequisites on the documentation, and there's a wizard that's going to guide you through linking your 2 environments. So we'll link new environment. First, it tells us to pick our CDS environment. I'm going to pick Alithia DualRight. Next, it asks us to pick the legal entities in this F&O environment. What's nice is you can select multiple companies here. So DualRight does allow multi-company sync with CDS. So here I'm going to select USMF and maybe USP2. It's going to check and make sure that all the prereqs and validation occurs. You've set up your users, DualRight's on the right version. Once you get all those checkboxes, you can click Next, and the system will automatically create those connections, link the environments, and it'll deploy some of the maps, and we can start setting up DualRight. Give this a moment. Of course, there's a lot of back-end work happening on the back end. And once this is done, you see that error or the message up there, don't see any entity maps, click Apply Solution. So we'll go ahead and click Apply Solution up there at the top. And this may take up to 30 minutes. I've seen it getting faster and faster. And essentially, once you apply the latest solution, this is where all of those maps are going to occur. And they're going to come in a not running state, and we'll be able to begin running them. So we'll give this a second. And then as those solutions in CDS get upgraded, that's where the new maps and the updated maps come in. So you'll click Apply Solution often when Microsoft releases new maps. So here are all those maps. We can see none of them are running. Now we can start enabling them. So the first one you want to enable is currencies, right? So we click on a map. There's this initial sync concept where it's going to push all of the data from either common data service or F&O into the other system. So F&O is going to be our master record. We're going to push all the currencies in from F&O into CDS, and we're going to click Run. So you'll see that it's going to take a couple of minutes, seconds to process. Now what's nice is you'll be able to see these as entities coming in to the CDS environment. So if we look and we pull up Advanced Find in CDS under currencies, we'll click refresh and we've seen that 176 currencies have just come into the system. So as you're pushing data in, you can kind of see that it's making progress back and forth. Once the mapping goes to running, that means that any new currencies that are created in either system are going to get these mappings applied and be transformed and pushed DualRight into the other system. So we can see that there's been 177 observes. So we can keep track of the errors and troubleshoot as DualRight progresses. Let's take a look at another one. You can run one map at a time. You can also run multiple maps at a time. And this is something that Microsoft's gotten really good at the past couple of releases, is associating these maps with their dependencies. So now when I go to select this exchange rate currency pair, I can look at the related entities. I can even drag and drop to reorder them, and I can run multiple maps at a time. I wouldn't recommend you run all 7,500 maps at once. Do them kind of in chunks. All the ones that are like named the same typically have good dependencies set up, and you can run them kind of in order. So here was an example of running 2 maps at a time, and it's going to run them in order. Again, some of the records are parent-child relationships. You can't import the child unless the parent is there, those sort of things. If you get like an error like that, you'll see those errors pop up. We can jump in to the mapping to see what happened. This is a common issue that I ran into that maybe you'll run into, is there's some security issues that essentially need to be worked out, or Microsoft's still working out. And so I don't know if they've shipped a security role yet that gives access to all of the custom entities that they've built, but you may need to add those custom entities to your security role. So essentially saying, hey, we can't create this record because the users in this business unit are missing read on the exchange type. So very robust, just logging of errors, right? We can easily get in, figure out what happened. Let's go in and we can rerun that map again. And here we see the same issue, actually, for the other map. So again, missing privileges. Now, you'll need to go in and either update your existing security rules or create a new one and give at least read access to these custom entities. Now, once we've done that, we can click Run, and this map will run successfully. We can see it's running, and in a couple of seconds, we'll see some upserts and errors, or how that next run will progress. And I expect to see all upserts here. So there is some troubleshooting that it provides you with the admin screens, but you're able to see how these maps are running, how many upserts, how many errors, what actions do I need to take. And we can see that it's pushed in all those exchange rates now into CDS. The last quick demo I want to show is just the end-to-end flow. Is now you've got your integration set up with DualRight. What does it look like? So here we're in Dynamics 365 Sales. A user is going to go ahead and create a new account, Contoso Retail Denver. Notice I have to pick a company, right? So I have to denote which company this goes into. I'll give it an account number. Only customers sync back and forth. I'm going to give it an address. Out of the box, you have to give it a country for it to save. Notice I also have to enter a customer group. So we're seeing some F&O bits now have to be populated in order for the data to sync. I click Save. It's now trying to create this account inside of F&O. It just completed that. Let's add a quick contact. So let's add a new contact to reach Susan to Contoso Retail Denver. And again, when I click Save, it's not only going to try to commit this to the CDS sales database, it's also going to create a contact in F&O. If we go into F&O, we can refresh our account list. We see our new account there. And if we drill into that account, we'll see Susan, that new contact, listed under the contacts for this account inside of Finance and Operations. There she is. Now let's create a quote. So let's follow that prospect to cash kind of flow, which DualRight has. So we'll create a new quote for Contoso Retail Denver, give it a name, we'll click Save. I'll add in my products. Now again, these are products that came from F&O. I'll pull in my product catalog out of the price list. We'll use this acoustic foam panel. Notice it's automatically pulled the pricing in, the shipping site and warehouse from F&O. Now, with DualRight, the minute I save that quote, it shows up in F&O. So it ends in N9. There's the one that ends in N9. And we can see there's the header and line details. Let's go back to the quote. Let's activate it. And now we can create an order. So the customer's agreed to this quote. We're ready to process it. We're going to create that order in Dynamics 365 Sales. And it's going to create an order inside of Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. We can go into Finance and Operations, go to our orders. It ends in H2. Pull up the one that ends in H2 that was just created for Contoso Retail Denver. And this processing status will change throughout its life cycle. So it'll go from active to processed to invoiced as it goes through its journey of being picked and shipped and eventually invoiced to the customer. So sales, customer service has real-time visibility. Let's go ahead and confirm this sales order in F&O. And so F&O is confirming the sales order. It's got all the header, line item details, came over from the quote and the order from sales. And if we go back and refresh this, we see that the status is now confirmed. Let's go back and let's generate a picking list for this. So it's hit the warehouse. We're now fulfilling this order. We can see it's been picked. And now let's start to post the picking slip and show that it's been invoiced to the customer. So we're updating the packing slip. If we go back, we'll see that it's now been delivered. Now we can invoice the customer, right? So we can take that order, turn it into an invoice. F&O will collect payments, collections, and now we'll be able to see that invoice come into Dynamics 365 Sales or Customer Service. And again, these can even be displayed on a portal. So if you want a customer to be able to go in and see their orders and invoices on a portal, all this can be displayed on a Power App portal. There are other DualRight scenarios that can be enabled. There's a real-time pricing engine that can be pulled on demand. We have the ability to look up on-hand inventory and promise dates. There's in-house assets for servicing for like EAM, enterprise asset management. We can leverage field service for the schedule board. We can do integrated worker and job positions, and they're starting to integrate just more of the Power Platform integrations, those prospect to cash, the field service, and the project service features into DualRight for a full end-to-end scenario. I want to thank you so much for taking time to attend my session. I hope you found it valuable. There'll be helpful links that are posted along with my content. And again, I wanted to thank you so much for voting for my presentation, and I hope to get the opportunity to present to you again. Thank you so much. Join me in the live chat where I'll be there to answer your questions.